Welcome back, design students. In this video, we're going to explore the concepts of rigging by setting up a very simple hierarchy to deform a very simple mesh. And we're also going to set up control objects and set up the scene like we would if we were rigging an actual character, just to get used to the process. But before we get started, I wanted to show you how I used the rigging system that I set up to pose my rabbit in a larger scene. And this is what you need to do if you want to pose your rabbit in something other than the T-pose, or any character for that matter. You can see here that he is part of a larger scene, and if I wanted to, I could set the scene such that it's an animation and he wakes up and then he gets up and does a little dance or whatever, but that is what you need to do in order to have him do anything other than stand there in the T-pose. So here I have a blank scene file, and you can either create this scene file in your Rabbit project folder, or if you don't have or didn't finish your Rabbit character, or your Rabbit character mesh is less than ideal, you can use the one that's provided by your instructor. Either way, when you start up Maya with your blank scene file, you're going to need to set your project folder to the Rabbit project folder that you had created before. Here's mine. So let's go to the poly modeling shelf and create a cylinder, and then let's go to the attributes editor and get the poly cylinder 1 node and increase the cylinder's height to something like, I don't know, 15, and then move it up so that it is on the ground. And then let's give it some height segments. Now this is important because it's going to have segments for the bones to deform. And we can just imagine that this might be the arm or leg or tail of a character. We're going to put more than 2 bones in it. If it were an arm or a leg, we would just have the upper arm and the lower arm, and then the hand coming off of that, or the foot coming off of that. So we'd really only have 2 bones in here if it were going to be an arm or a leg. So let's just imagine that it's a tail or something, because we're going to put more than 1 bone in, more than 2 bones in here. And when you're rigging, it's very important to work with a naming convention for all of the objects in your scene, because you're going to have a lot of them. So let's go ahead and rename this Geo for geometry, character mesh. And then let's go to the channel box and select your character mesh and hit create layer with selected objects, and we're going to name this mesh or something. Give it a color and save it. Now the reason I did that is so I can hide it easily if I want, and also freeze it. So let's go ahead and freeze it. Now in order to create bones, we need to be in the rigging menu set. And you can see here now that we have a number of different new menu items. One of the ones we have is skeleton, and if you click skeleton, you will see create joints. In Maya, bones are called joints. Now it's always best to create joints in what's called an orthographic view, which is a view that is not a perspective view like this one. So let's hit the space bar and go to the front view, which is a straight-on orthographic view. And the reason we're going to do this is because just like when we create curves, we need to be sure that all of the joints are on the same plane. If we were in a perspective view, that would not be the case. Now we're going to need to be able to see the bones that we create, because they're going to be inside the mesh when we create them, and we're going to need to be able to see where they are. So we can do a couple of different things. We can either go to wireframe mode, or we can turn on X-ray mode, which makes the mesh somewhat transparent. Either one is fine. But now let's create some joints. Go to skeleton, create joints. Now when you create a joint, when you click and drag, you will create another joint. And you can see that right here. Now I'm going to undo that real quick, and let's try doing it in wireframe. In wireframe, we can actually see the edges where we're putting the joints, and that's very important, so it's probably a good idea to use the wireframe method. And let's just select the Move tool to stop creating joints, and you will see here now that in our outliner we have a hierarchy of joints set up. This is a child of this one is a child of that one is a child of that, and that is the main parent bone. If I select the main parent bone and rotate it, then everything follows. If I select the second bone and rotate it, then everything above that follows. And that is the automatic parent-child relationship that comes with creating joints. So let's go ahead and rename these. Right now they're just joint 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's imagine that this is the spine of a character or something. So let's double-click the first joint and name it spine 0, 1. Oop. And now we can manually rename these, and it's not that hard to do that, but if you have a lot of them, it would be kind of difficult. So the best thing to do is to use search and replace. So select the second joint bone and go to Modify, Search and Replace. And what we're going to search for is joint, and we're going to replace joint with spine. And we're going to do it on the hierarchy and click Replace. And you'll see that very quickly replaces joint with spine, but only in this hierarchy. And before we leave here, let's collapse this and select all of these. You can select the first one and hold down Shift and select the second one. And this is our completed skeleton for this, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer with these. I'm going to call this Bones and give it a color. You can now see they have the layer color, and I can toggle their visibility or freeze them if I want to. Okay, so we're going to stop this video here, and when we come back we will create the control objects for this and bind them to the bones, and I'll see you then.